should we see if we can make it happen, And we talked about it, and it was always on the plan, but it was 15 years out. And with lockdown and COVID and all of that stuff, I guess we just sort of expedited it and brought it forward by about 15 years. How about doing it that way? How about using social media a bit more cleverly? There's multiple touch points you can use. People do read stuff. What you guys have done with the podcast, that's so effective. And I'm seeing a lot of vendors go down that route as well, where yes, they're there, but they've got this arm, this education arm, if you will. And now, crikey, I'm sure it still goes on, but just the buzz and the excitement around the different ways the industry is going, and also the providers coming into the market as well. I mean, there's so many cool things out there now.
Welcome to the Channel Chat podcast. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Channel Chat podcast. I'm delighted to be joined by the one and only Tinesh Chhaya, the founder of Decipher Cyber. Jenny, how are we doing?
Good, very well. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Very good. It's interesting, actually. I remember we met between the last two lockdowns in a little coffee shop in Gerrard's Cross, and now you live in Australia. Tell us about what's happened there.
Yeah, do you know what? It was nice coffee as well. I remember they wouldn't let you in or something. Remember you and Mark? They wouldn't let you in because you didn't have your mask.
No mask. Yeah. We've learned now. That was very early lockdown, wasn't it?
It was, crikey, and how time's flown. So I can't remember at that time if we even had Australia on the plan or not. I don't think we did.
I don't think you did. You didn't mention it then. I don't think so.
Yeah, so I think that must have been summertime. So it was actually that December time where we sat down and as a family we decided, you know what, where should we go? If we had a choice of going somewhere. So what actually happened was first lockdown was quite hard for everybody. Then the winter months came and second lockdown came. But second lockdown was when the weather was cold, it was dark. And, it was very, very tough on people. I just remember it was a really, really tough time for a lot of people. And I've got a young family and we were sitting there and literally the conversation went, girls, I've got a 12-year-old and an 8-year-old and obviously I've got my wife. And I said to these guys, let's have a vote. If you could go anywhere in the world, put your hands up where you'd like to go. So we started off with all the places I wanted to go, like New York, and no one put their hand up. And then I said Dubai and no one put their hand up. I think my wife barely put her hand up. And then we got to Australia, which was somewhere we'd visited 3 years ago for Christmas. And literally all the hands shot up, and there was just this big beaming smiles of all the girls. And I said, there's something here, So I went for a walk with my wife because that's all you could do, right? Walk at that time. And I said, do you know what, man? If we could go anywhere, and if we could go to somewhere like Australia, should we see if we can make it happen, And we talked about it, and it was always on the plan, but it was 15 years out. And with lockdown and COVID and all of that stuff, I guess we just sort of expedited it and brought it forward by about 15 years. Yeah. And literally, it was as simple as that, stuff it, let's just do it, right, as they say.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting approach because so many people would find a million reasons not to do it or get hesitant or whatever else. But how's life working over there? Because imagine you're on different times and you're probably trying to accommodate people across the world when you're on calls and stuff. How's that been, that transition?
Yeah, so it's 8 o'clock in the evening right now, and this is the time I'm typically working. So what's happening is I get my day back. So in my day, I do a little bit of admin type stuff. I catch up on emails. I'm, spending time with the girls, which is kind of what I wanted, especially right now because it's summer holidays over here. And then typically about 4 or 5 o'clock, I'll start spinning up. And then I get my team we have like huddles every single morning. So we'll have huddles UK time about 8 o'clock. And that's roughly about, I think it's about 7 o'clock for us. And then I'll be working, and some nights I'm working till about 2 in the morning. That's quite exhausting because, as you get older, you get tired and you want to be in bed by 11. So that I struggle with. It's typically investor calls or something like that, which I'll stay up for. But the team are now really well organized where any vendor conversation, any end user conversation, anything really important, we'll try and do in that sort of 8 o'clock until 11 o'clock window for me, which is the evening. And it's kind of up to about 11, 12 o'clock in the afternoon for you. And then after that, to be fair, the guys will just kind of carry on and doing their stuff, and then we'll circle back the next day. Yeah. It works. It works quite well, actually.
Yeah, excellent. Okay. Let's jump straight into it, because what I find absolutely fascinating is you've been obviously in cybersecurity for 18 years, and if there's one market that's gone through so many changes in that time, it's got to be cybersecurity. I can't even comprehend what you've seen in that time. But what initially attracted you to kind of cybersecurity?
So I used to work for a company called Gartner, which I'm sure a lot of your audience will know who they are.
Yeah.
And Gartner have an inside out view, right? So they know what's going on out there. And at the time, there wasn't this thing called cyber. It was like firewalls and AV. It was pretty simple back then, right? Now it's all like, cool words and buzzwords and cyber, for example. And when I was working for Gartner, I, I was in that technology space where we had sight of a lot of these companies out there. And there was a company called Sophos at the time. It was an antivirus company. I thought, hey, that's so cool what they do. And there's a thing called antivirus, and they're protecting people, and protecting these things called endpoints. And I thought, I want to do a bit of that. I want to try that. And actually, that's what having that inside view out on the world, or that Gartner view rather. I made the plunge into my first sort of cybersecurity or IT security, or whatever you want to call it, right? Company. And I never looked back after that. You just kind of grew and grew, your thirst for the knowledge and your thirst to expand your understanding of what IT security actually is and to what it is now. That's where it started for me. But until that point, had I not had that view, I probably would have still been working at Gartner, or still been working in that research space somewhat, and, rightly or wrongly.
Yeah, exactly. Could you foresee where cyber was going at that time, or were you just kind of jumping in and thinking, let's go and give this a crack and see how we get on?
No, I wish I could say with this white beard of mine, I had that wisdom of a guru and stuff, right? And I could see, because I would have placed some bets and I would have been a wealthy man. But no, not at all. I was a young guy. I was probably, if I look back, I was probably led by the fact that the basic salary was probably pretty good at the time, and they offered me a car and a big phone and all that jazzy stuff. I'm pretty certain I'd love to say to the audience, it was, I had this oracle. I had Jenny, for example, and I saw where the market was going. Not at all. It was probably led by, my wife, who's, was probably my girlfriend at the time, and let's buy a house, let's buy a car, let's do all that kind of stuff. And it's probably more driven by that.
Yeah.
But yeah, no.
Fair enough. What's the most exciting thing that you've seen in that transition of cybersecurity? Is there anything that really jumps out? You thought, oh wow, that's popped up. This is going to be an absolute game changer, or has it been quite fluid and it's always changing? So that's always been the case.
So many things, have changed. It's certainly in the time I've been in it, and even more so from some of the peers I work with who are older than me. That sort of 45 to 55, slightly older guys who have been in it, and they've really been there from the start. And even when you talk to those guys to where I am, to where if you look at this next generation, technology has just jumped out. The different types of skills you need now, the different type of threat vectors, the different type of attacks that are coming in. I mean, even that log shell one that happened just the other day, as I'm now thinking, crikey, I had to check my own company to see where we're going with this, right? And have we been affected? So from in every possible way, as far as I can remember, it's changed, and also the space has just got so much more exciting. It's a lot faster now. It's a lot quicker. It wasn't so quick when I was working for, I won't mention the name of the companies, but even 10 years ago or 15 years ago, it wasn't that quick. There was exciting because there was box standard products, which everybody knew, the household names, and you would go and push those, and the vendors would come in and offer you an iPhone 1, I'm sure, go and sell this product. It was so simple back then. And now, crikey, I'm sure it still goes on, but just the buzz and the excitement around the different ways the industry's going, and also the providers coming into the market as well. I mean, there's so many cool things out there now, from services companies to product companies to individuals to consultants, contractors. You must see that, right? You guys, what you guys do. It's so much more broader. You can't just come in and, well, you have to come in and hit one thing specifically, but it's the way the market, these people are coming in with these really, really clever ideas and trying to tackle what was a traditional problem in a very new way. I like that. And obviously I get a lot of sight on that because of what we do as a business, right?
Yeah.
I love that. I love talking to vendors and I love talking to the market to see, okay, how can these connect? But is there synergy? And even the market, some of the seasoned market, like, wow, we didn't know that you could tackle this problem in that way. Using automation, for example, massive change, right? You thought a sock's going to be automated at some point, right? So very cool. I do like that. Keeps you on your toes.
You mentioned at the start there that probably people that come into cybersecurity, maybe 45, 50, would have caught the really early cusp of that cybersecurity space. Looking at a lot of business owners, particularly smaller business owners, would probably be around that age. And I would make the assumption a lot of them out of the industry probably don't know too much about cybersecurity even now. Do you think enough businesses in 2021 are taking cybersecurity seriously and they're doing the right things with their own businesses?
Yeah, 100%. They've had to because of the hybrid working model, right, and the remote working model. I mean, I'm sure I'm not the first guest to say this, and I won't be the last, right? It's not going to change in a hurry. People have now adopted that home working, and with that comes a whole set of different challenges for that business owner. I know we just before COVID, we were about to get an office. COVID came, and then I decided to. Well, I'm thankful actually that I didn't sign that contract because I would have been tied in 6 months, and I would have, it's painful, right? You could have just walked out of it. But having to make those structural changes, infrastructural changes rather, for my team, it's the same applies to any small business. Do you see what I mean? Are we safe? We had a phishing attack the other day, just the other day, and my sales client success girl opened up the email and she said, I thought you sent me this. I said, I didn't send you this. Told you not to open anything. And she panicked, bless her. But it just re-engineered my name. If you opened up the email address, you could have seen it was someone else, but she didn't know it. And it was from Tinesh Chhaya, and it had an Apple ID gift card thing. And she thought, why does Tinesh want these gift cards? So that's very basic, right? But if you think about from even a mature small organization, unless if they were in that space where they're an accounting firm or a law firm or a school or independent or anything like that, which probably had an IT department already and they're used to technology to sort of underpin and help protect cyber, it's a different thing. But if you take your everyday business, like your mummy and pappy fish and chip shop or things like that, it doesn't really apply. It doesn't. We see when in the consulting business I had, we used to stay away from a lot of that stuff, even though they used to come and ask us. Basic education awareness we do, but anything more complex than that's doesn't really sit there, didn't really play. But anything that involved any kind of data, definitely there's been a change, and there will continually be, a move towards adopting cybersecurity, whatever it may be, whether you outsource it to your IT person or your IT provider, if you've got one, or you decide to try and handle it yourself. And I've seen a lot of people, a lot of businesses becoming more and more savvy, and I'm talking to business owners who are just doing it themselves.
Yeah.
They're like, well, I went and got Cyber Essentials. Oh, good for you. I got Cyber Essentials Plus. I'm like, well, really good. And then next thing, I'm getting a pen test done. Wow. And they're running this stuff past me, not for anything else, not to kind of say, look at me, look how great I am. It's just a sanity check that am I doing the right thing? And I'll give them some checks in there. Say, go do this, and they go off and do it. And I think that's great, but it's not going to change. Not in a hurry. Not in 2022 either. It's going to carry on for a while, I think. People like working from home.
Yeah, it must be tough for business owners or maybe not IT managers aren't too tech savvy, being approached by their account manager saying, this is the next big threat, this is a big threat, you need to spend this money, you spend this money. What do you think is the true biggest threat in kind of moving into 2022 from a cybersecurity point of view at the moment? Is it the data side still?
So, I mean, I can go by what we see on our platform. I know we'll talk about that later, but we can definitively see. I can tell you what the sort of top 5 things are that people are looking at, and rather than my answer, which is going to be a little bit based on what I see, what I read, what I hear, what I which in my opinion, cloud's definitely a big thing. Cloud's going to be the way forward. I read something recently that AWS own the internet now. Do they? It was AWS or Microsoft. I mean, imagine people are saying they own the internet, and they provide those security services now, and very scalable and very cost effective, right? So that's one thing. That's one answer. But if I just very quickly touch on what we see from a platform perspective, we've got 7,500 users now. The top things people still search for or are searching for is cloud, is pen testing. Pen testing gets searched a lot. Why not? Why wouldn't it be? It's the obvious place where, if you just come into the industry, people are going to say, oh, not in the industry, but if you're a business and you've just come into the space, what's people going to say? Get a pen tester, right? It's just, and it gets searched a lot. I mean, a hell of a lot, right? Every day, hundreds of times it gets searched. Pen testing, who are they? Cybersecurity education awareness, big. Why wouldn't it be? It kind of makes sense, right?
Yeah.
If you've got a team of, if you've got employees, educate them, right? Cybersecurity consulting is a big. So those four, the big ones. The fifth one isn't kind of relevant, but it's more around threat intelligence. But those four absolutely make sense. So if I never had the information I had based on real usage and real users, actually the market's kind of talking about those 4 or 5 things anyway, but it's just a little bit more validated. So I can say to you, it's a bit more of a concrete answer that actually, got thousands of users looking for those things. So when I talk to vendors in that space, can you imagine, they get very excited when I say, by the way, yeah, your company's a pen testing company is getting looked at a lot at the moment, or not your company, but generally that space.
Yeah.
And that's the way it is. People are still looking for the ground things, easy tick, easy win things to help them secure their whatever they're trying to secure. So
excellent.
Yeah, it's quite exciting.
So we'll touch on your current venture shortly, and that whole kind of startup world environment and all the interesting stories that come with that. But you obviously spent a long time in the corporate world, and you mentioned a couple of businesses you worked for there. You would have been around a lot of salespeople in that time. What do you think makes a great salesperson? Like, you see those top billers in those big vendors. What makes them stand out from the rest?
All of them were fantastic relationship builders, without a shadow of a doubt. Even the ones I wanted to be like, even when I was in my 30s, I was like, when I grow up, I want to be like him, right? They'd walk in, they put the nice keys down, they've got the nice Mont Blanc wallet, all those typical things. It's really weird, like none of those things interest me anymore, right? But all those materially type things. But one thing they all had was they were superb stakeholder. They used to manage their stakeholders really, really well, and they did stakeholder mapping extremely well. And there was a couple of people, I mean, I can't say their names, but there were a couple who I used to kind of look up to, because from them I'd always learn the 2 or 3 people they would always have in their relationship. Procurement, right? You've got to keep procurement in the, because those poor people always get bought in last, right? So they would manage that relationship very early on. Even if they weren't asked to, they would manage it. They would manage the program management team extremely well and early and help them, because typically these guys aren't involved with technical, they've not ran certain projects. The first time they're being asked to do certain projects, right? And so the sales guy or girl would help them. And then obviously you've got the security team and then finances in there somewhere, right? But if you take those 3 stakeholders in any given security delivery project, if you can manage those and help bring them along your journey, they were the sales guys who did extremely well. Because what happens is, when you have your QBRs, when you do your account management, your deal management with your bosses, they're the questions you're going to get asked. Have you mapped against all the correct stakeholders? And the ones who weren't particularly great, they'll be like, oh God, now I'm only spending all my time with the CISO. Well, actually, it's not the CISO who makes the decision, right? It may be 2 left of him, or 2 right of him, or 2 under him, right? That makes that decision. And it also could be procurement that make that decision. So what I learned with a couple of people who popped into mind straight away was they managed to build those relationships extremely well. They also extended those relationships, and rightly or wrongly, and I subscribe to it, by the way, is building beyond the professional relationship and making it personal, and not having a necessary outcome. Like, I'm going to make sure I'm your, we're going to do business and I'm just going to stick with you just for the deal and never hear from you again. I've got relationships from like 10 years ago, and we never talk about work. In fact, 2 of these guys sit on my board right now. It's really interesting. Because of those relationships, they're on my board. And I've got 2 big brands on my board because of those people. So it was never, those salespeople are also extremely good. But then it takes a level of maturity as well, Mark, right? If you're a young person and you're having to face off to a senior security leader, there is so much you can talk about, right? And there's so much you'll have in common outside of the golf course and that lovely bottle of Barolo and that steak, right? But then it ends there. Whilst when I think what happens is all of those guys and girls that I used to look up to, and now, you know, at one point I became one of those, was you just don't take this stuff too seriously. Number one, right? Of course, you've got to hit a number, so you don't take it too seriously. B, I'm genuinely interested in building a relationship with this person, because I think actually how fascinating is their life? You know, what goes on in their world outside of work, because you know, work is work. And I think I've become more like that since I've become an owner of a company, because you know, now I just think win or lose the deal, I still want to know, how did your journey go? And that's just probably an evolution of the mindset I had before, right? So, you know, they're the kind of the main things. It was never about someone who, you know, was shiny enough and flashy enough and all those things. It's never about that, actually. In fact, that probably grinds on people. I remember going to one meeting. I'll tell you a story. I remember going to one meeting in Peterborough, and we all know who's in Peterborough. It's a fairly decent, you know, financial company. And I went representing an SI, and the vendors came along. The vendors all had Breitlings on, and they were sitting opposite an IT security manager who had a white shirt with the short sleeves. I sat on their side because obviously I was the SI, and he looked at them and he goes, "Oh, look, it's the Breitling boys." And these vendors didn't know where to look. Every single one of them, even the pre-sales guy, had a Breitling on. Now, that just know your audience, man. If you're in the city and you're presenting to a bank, fair enough. But when you're going to Peterborough and your audience is sitting there with he's a simpleton in the sense that, you know, he's there for business. He needs your advice, and you're rocking up wearing 10 grand's worth of wristwear or whatever it's called. It just doesn't, you know, it's just, I used to giggle at stuff like that. And in fact, I joined in with them, and we called them the Breitling boys for quite a while after that. If they're watching this, they know who they were.
I love that. If someone reaches out and says, I was one of them. Okay, so, because my next question was going to be, it's so difficult now to win new clients, and whether you're building out kind of content on LinkedIn or building out this marketing funnel, there's so much noise out at the moment, and you could be out there making calls and finally get that client and get that first deal over the line to win their trust. But that's fine. But if you're not expanding on that and building that account out and redeveloping it, then you're not going to kind of move on and redevelop from there. So kind of key points is understand your audience, manage the kind of key stakeholders, and also go beyond work. They're the kind of key messages.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, listen, you've raised a valid point. Remember, I look at it because I've worked for big SIs, and you're there to build relationships, and you're going to move along with these relationships, and I get it. So if you're working for a startup and it's a point solution, how much of a relationship can you build?
Yeah.
How much of a relationship do you want to build? And equally, it's a numbers game, right? Because you've got probably a founder or a boss who's funded, and they've got to just generate revenue, and it's, you know, bam, 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 right? And it's about getting those deals on the board. So I understand that pressure. So I guess my mindset is coming from a more of the bigger ticket stuff.
Yeah.
But if you're going to do the sort of rack 'em and stack 'em and get a lot of these deals over the line very quickly, you've got to move fast. But at the same time, it's very difficult for you to compete next to, you know, Bob or Fred, because there are a lot of Bob and Freds out there as well, right? And that's where you have to use, like you said, you've got to be clever with social media. You've got to be very, very clever with your outbound. You can't go hitting people on the phone anymore, even though it still exists. You know, there's this new LinkedIn process now, sequential LinkedIn messages, people, you know, automating, so it looks like it's actually the salesperson, but it's not. It's just sequential automated LinkedIn messaging that comes on. I know I get a bucket of these every day, right?
You can see them as well, can't you? You know when they've been written properly. I know there's probably some algorithms that are really good, and you probably won't be able to see through them, but the majority, I feel like you can probably see through, can't you now?
You can, because, and you can bet on them now as well. But I can even say my next message is going to come in the next 3 days.
Yeah.
And it's, "Hey Tinesh, I'm putting this in the back of at the top of your inbox." I'm like, you can put it where you want to put it. I'm just, you know, because I think it's a really good point, because what a lot of salespeople, you know, it's a functional role, and I get it. I used to be one, and I still am one. Is that, you know, you need to hit the number, you need to do what you need to do, and you need to appease the bosses and the boss and the boss and all that jazz, right? But at the end of the day, you're talking to people who have a multifunctional role. They may be an owner of a company, they may be running an entire security, they may be running security, or they may be the CISO. they're not waiting for your message, and they certainly don't have time to read your message. And that's why I feel for these guys, because you see a lot of CISOs now giving vendors a lot of slack on LinkedIn, for example. If I'm interested in your product, I'll message you. Leave me alone. Because if you think about it, there's 9,500 vendors out there. Times that by just one salesperson each trying to hit Tinesh's little company or Tinesh's whatever company. It's a lot of people hitting my inbox every day, right? Trying to sell me stuff. So naturally, after a while, they become desensitized and they get upset. And if you work for a branded company, then you're in even more trouble, because you're on their target list, right? There's an account plan, there's an account list somewhere, and you're on it, and you're one of the 50 top targets they're going to hit this quarter, and your name's on it, buddy. And they're gonna, and these sales guys are gonna hit it. So I think if everybody just relaxed with that a little bit, went around, educated the users instead, went out and got feedback instead. Look for feedback. Why are you trying to sell something? Look for feedback on your product, and that may turn into a sale, right? How about doing it that way? How about using social media a bit more cleverly? There's multiple touch points you can use. People do read stuff. What you guys have done with the podcast, that's so effective, and I'm seeing a lot of vendors go down that route as well, where yes, they're there, but they've got this arm, this education arm, if you will, and they're using social media and podcasts and video and content, the next wave, the evolution of information, and talking about stuff, whether it's industry, whether it's identifying the problem that their product solves. Cool, do it that way, but that's the way forward. I think that will help bolster because what will happen is, oh yeah, I remember seeing that. That's what that person's going to say. I remember seeing that podcast. I remember reading that blog or seeing that white paper, listening to that podcast, whatever it may be. And then it's positioned, and then when I'm ready, I'll come knock on your door. But I think that other way is gone now. I mean, I'd love to hear the salespeople's opinions, because
that'd be really interesting, because I was going to ask what's had success with you. What have you kind of replied to or answered back to? Because I'm sure there's tons of messages around lead generation or SEO or a huge other amount of things. But is there anything you can remember that just really jumps out that could be a nice little pointer for salespeople moving forward?
There used to be a time when I used to go back quite a lot, but now it's so thick and fast. I can't keep up.
Yeah,
I really can't keep up, and it's not because I don't want to reply. There's some pretty still cool stuff that comes through, but even by the time I get my headspace, because I'm not going to see it come through, read it, and go straight away. I'm going to mark it and say, okay, I'll come back. But because I'm doing a gazillion things in the day, I won't go back to it, because it's just not that important, or it's just not on my radar, and I just don't need it right now. Right. But it is registered. So for everybody who's doing it, and we do different things, and we've got a sales function too. It is registering, and then when I'm ready, I will go back and I'll say to my team, by the way, this came in. Will one of you respond to it? And let's see if we can use them as a provider. Like video. We're looking at video. Oh, maybe I shouldn't say that. We're not looking for video. We've got video covered, just in case I get a million video people call me. But it's stuff like that. It doesn't. I wish I could say I go back. I just don't, man, because it's just too much of it.
Yeah, that's a bit understandable. Right, fast forward to 2019. You've done, 15, 16 years in kind of cybersecurity. You're earning well. You've got a young family. Life's stable. Life's good. And you decide to start your own business. Why?
Yeah. Yeah. Do I think I just wanted to, it was probably at that time, I'll tell you what it was at that time. When we have a side hustle, we've always had a side hustle. I can say it now. I never used to say it before when I used to work for people, but I always used to have a side hustle. At one point, I was selling cars off my drive whilst working for somebody. I had a catering business. I always did something, on the side, because I always just wanted to do something. What I should have done, and my only regret is that I wish I'd started a cybersecurity focused business instead of all these little side hustles a long time ago, instead of when I did decide to start, which is 5 years ago. Because when I did decide to make this leap, take the leap of faith and jump off the cliff, or whatever you want to call it, I then focused on cybersecurity with my consulting business. And what happened is I really got myself into it, immersed. I was properly immersed into it because I knew it. I knew the ecosystem. I knew what the challenges and the problems were. So it was a combination of being made redundant. It was a combination of, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it now. I was 41 at the time, right? I mean, people can work out how old I am now, but I was 41 at the time. It was a cold January morning. I remember leaving the building I'd just been made redundant for, and I could have taken a left, which was go home, get my CV done, and off and away onto the next track, you know, or in which case it was the blue pill or the red pill. I took the blue pill. The blue pill, you know, I wanted to start this cybersecurity something, and you know, it was tough. I'm not gonna lie to you, man. The first year was tough. I burnt through all my savings. I put myself in hospital twice with anxiety attacks. You know, it was really, really hard, man. People, I mean, I've written a book about it, right, which is, you know, way delayed. But I wrote a book called Startup ... What the Fudge Cracker, and it talks about the reality of starting a company. People just see the glamorous side of it, right? They see the tip of the iceberg. You know, they see the successes. They see the guy on the beach. You know, but actually, the reality is, I know so many entrepreneurs in our space as well as outside of cyber, and they all have these challenges. You know, and when you really talk to these guys, actually, it's a really tough gig. You know, it's a really, you know, it's feast and famine. People, you may have heard of that term. You've heard of people where there's a lot of mental illness challenges, imposter syndrome. There's a lot of stuff that goes on, but actually, what was all of that for me now coming out of it, you know, it's a bit of a hockey stick now as we've come back out to the market and I've settled, is you start to accept some of these things and know that, okay, it's only momentary, you know, and it will get better. And it generally does, right? And it could change within 24 hours. That's the other thing I've learned, you know, like one moment you're sitting there thinking, it's like a sales guy. One moment I'm thinking, oh man, my number, I'm never gonna hit my number. And next day, something's happened and back in the game. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And but you apply that to everything in the business, right?
Yeah.
Not just the sales. Now sales just becomes one part of the jigsaw, right?
Yeah, a small cog in that huge machine. Okay, and it's a nice way you touch on that actually, because you obviously bring through your own difficulties running your own business. What advice would you give someone that's probably in that rut or is really struggling at the moment? Is it being around the right people? Is there any approaches that you'd recommend that
within employment or within
with your own startup, with your own business? Yeah, because I imagine it's quite a nice state feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a lonely place. It's a lonely place, and it was for me as well for about 12 months until I sort of started relaxing into it and started building an ecosystem of people around me. I'm part of a group of cyber entrepreneurs. There's about 4 of us in the group. We call ourselves Great Minds. Don't ask me why. Just that was the name we gave it. I can't tell you the name of the people in it, but literally they're all at different stages in their entrepreneurial journey. So the sort of the most mature company has, you know, they're 5-6 years out the traps. They've raised a lot of money and all the rest of it. Then there's somebody else, then there's me, and then there's somebody else, and there's another new person we're bringing. And we all share ideas and we talk about stuff. It helps, it serves that purpose. But what it also does is that it gives you somewhere and someone to talk to about your journey, because they're all very similar, right? You're either raising money, you're trying to figure out contracts, you're just about to secure a big deal, and you want to know how to make sure that deal is built out correctly and there's no pitfalls in the contracts or in the legalities or whatever it may be. So that's the operational stuff. But for me personally, I love having this network, and it's grown now beyond that Great Minds. I've got a whole bunch of people who at any given point I'll turn to these guys and just ask for advice and say, look, I'm feeling like this, so I'm thinking about doing this. And you know, as I teach my kids, sharing is caring, right? Literally, there's a whole bunch of grown-ups who do sharing is caring as well in our industry, and you just need to find your tribe. You know, and I found my tribe, and it's a nice mix of influences. It's young and old, it's black and white, it's female, male. It's a really beautiful bunch of people. You'll know who they are because they're the ones who are constantly liking my stuff. If you want to know who my tribe is, I just have to post something. When you post this out, my tribe will say something, and you'll know who they are, right? But they're the people I confide in, they're the people I trust, they're the people I care and love, and equally it's reciprocated. And what that means is that I don't ever feel alone, not anymore. You know, likewise, they don't feel alone. So we can just share our stuff together and just say, look, practical stuff or emotional stuff or personal. It's a proper roller coaster having your own company. And if you're out there right now and it's feeling like, oh, I don't know, it's a bit lonely, all the rest of it, find your tribe. Reach out to me, man. I love talking. But you know, find your people and then just open up. You've got to, man. Otherwise, you won't make informed, balanced decisions if you just do it by yourself. And especially if you own your own company. I mean, I've got a co-founder, so it's a lot easier. But that's the other thing. The first company I was by myself, every decision was myself. Never a great thing, right? Never a great thing. But when you've got a co-founder, and make sure they're completely opposite to you. My co-founder is a young, passionate Italian man, and everything I say, and he knows who he is. He's probably been watching this. I'll say his name. His name's Newman. He challenges me with absolutely everything. Whether it's a commercial discussion, he's got an opinion. It's a technical decision. Obviously, he's the CTO. I challenge him, but not too much because I'm kind of scared of him. But we have this balance, right? It's a yin and a yang, and it works. And we're sharing the joy and the pain. So definitely, that's the biggest tip I'd give to any one of the people anybody out there who's on this journey, on this entrepreneurial journey. Worst case, go back and get a job.
What's the worst can happen?
You know what I mean? Easy, man.
Okay, so you leave your employer. You've got the decision on what direction to take. You take us that direction. Talk us through what you saw in the market, the gap you saw for Jenny, and talk us through what the platform, what it truly is.
Yeah, sure. So Jenny, the company is called Decipher Cyber. Jenny is actually the engine that aggregates all of the information that we collect, or the vendors and service providers that we find. But why did Jenny come back even in the first place? You get those stories where those founders say, oh, it started in a garage. And then it turned to a bazillion dollar company. Right. First off, mine's not a bazillion dollar company, and it didn't start in a garage. Mine was a lot more simpler. I was watching the Money Supermarket advert. The meerkat advert. Is it meerkat? Yeah. Is that the one? The little fluffy animal. Right. So I'm watching that. Mrs. Chaya's next to me, and we're watching it on TV. And I'm sitting there thinking, it'd be cool if there was a place like this for the cybersecurity industry. And my wife turned around to me and she said, there must be some kind of something out there that has all lists of cybersecurity companies. And she was right, there is a lot of repositories and lists, if you want them, and funky diagrams of vendors and providers out there, all boxed in categories. But that's not what I want. That's not what I was thinking. I wanted to find cybersecurity companies in real time, and aggregate them in one place and then give them to the users for free, right? But I wanted to do this using technology. So initially, when I built Jenny, I used some students in Kenya, because I'm from East Africa. So there's a university out there, and I paid these university students a small wage. It wasn't even a salary; it was a small wage to help me find cybersecurity companies. We found 700 of them, and we built out these categories. And that foundation work that we did actually was the base seed information for Jenny, the machine, when we built her. But we found about 700. And that was fine. We did a great job. And it took a couple of months to find these. So it was a collection of lists, aggregating lists, and using Google and blah, blah, blah. The usual things that people use to find these companies. And we created this Excel spreadsheet. The challenge we had was it's not real time. So once it's built, what happens, when Tinesh's firewall company comes out with a new service? Who's going to know that? Because we're not there. So we needed to address that. And that's where Jenny came about. I met with my co-founder, Newman. He said we can bring automation to this, build something very similar to the Google web crawling or web scraping technology. I struggled with that initial. People said, oh, it's just a web crawler. And I said, okay, now we call it web crawling technology. It sounds nicer. But actually, she's morphed into something a lot fancier now. And we do use supervised machine learning, and she does do a lot of this stuff herself. She's a completely different animal to what she was. But that's what it was. It was to help save research time. It was to help find cybersecurity companies, bring them into one centralized place, update the information real time, as in when the vendor or the service provider updated the information, and give it to users for free. And that was Jenny version 1. Very simple creature. And that's what we set about doing to where we are now.
Excellent. And talk us through the kind of latest update. So Jenny 2.0 is out now. What's going to change from your side?
Yeah, so JV1 was a marketing sales platform for the vendors. One thing that still surprises us is how many vendors are out there. Yeah. So when we came out into the market, with 2,500 vendors Jenny had found and indexed. As of JV2, so a couple of weeks ago, she's under 10,000 vendors, global cybersecurity vendors and service providers. And she continues to find 10 to 15 new ones a day. I mean, I openly say this, every now and then we switch Jenny off. We switch her, literally press pause. There's a stop button. If I could show you, it literally is. On the back engine, we've built this globe which spins around, and I might bring it to the platform at some point. It's pretty cool. And every time Jenny finds a new vendor or service provider, which is not in our existing database, it pops up a little IP address and the information comes out with the name of the company and all the rest of it that she's found. Very cool. My CTO said it was a complete waste of money, but I wanted it. And actually now I might bring it to the front. So that's number one. How on earth do you find a vendor to help you with, how do you navigate through that, right? So that's what Jenny is now. She's a business intelligence platform that doesn't just aggregate all these companies and brings them to one single pane of glass, but we asked our users who, again, when I built this platform, I thought our users would be cybersecurity professionals. They're not. They're cybersecurity professionals, CISOs, IT professionals. We've got private equity firms. We've got government users. We've got students, researchers, procurement managers. We've got just over 7,500 global users. We've got 422 of the world's biggest companies. So the global Forbes Fortune 2000 registered. Somebody in those big companies is using our platform to find this intelligence or find this information or find these vendors, either to invest in, partner with, buy their solution, whatever it may be. So she's morphed now into or grown into a cyber business intelligence platform with the view to providing not marketing sales information anymore. Of course, she'll still do that. Now we collect financial information on you. So are you a publicly listed company? Yes or no? Because procurement people want to know that, right?
Yeah.
In fact, it's information people want to know. How stable are you commercially? If you're an investor, if you're a startup, how far along are you in that investment track? So are you an acquisition risk? Because some companies don't want to invest in a company that's an acquisition risk, right? So we provide that kind of information. We provide, we built a little mini Jenny. So Jenny's now got a little mini Jenny, and mini Jenny now goes out there and looks for third-party review sites like Crunchbase, TechRadar, Glassdoor, and collects all of the scores, aggregates it, and gives your profile, Tinesh's cybersecurity company, that score as well, right? So that's number two. We've partnered with a third-party cybersecurity company. This was a very tough decision for us because there's a lot of vendors who provide passive security scores. So we had to be very objective. Obviously, Jenny knows who these companies are, but I went to my board. I didn't tell them, anything outside of, I presented them 4 cybersecurity companies who offer passive security scores. And I said, tell me which one of these we should which one has the best service capability for us to partner with. And there was one company that stood out. I won't tell you the name of them because it looks like it's powered by Jenny, but it's actually powered by this cybersecurity vendor. And they provide a third-party risk assurance score, threat intel score, and common vulnerability score on the vendors in light of all the recent breaches vendors have had, right? So if you think about it now, it's no longer just about the marketing and the sales information. It's about giving the user so much more information on there. Insurance information. How many vendors don't even have the appropriate insurance, basic insurances? It's nutty, right? So we ask stuff like that. Have they got a CSR policy? Have they got a graduate placement program? We're even thinking about asking some light security screening questions as well, but we may partner with somebody on that. And then finally, we've partnered with a massive influence here out in Sydney. It's just lucky she's based out in Sydney. Her name's Carissa A. Breen, and she has built herself a superb brand where she'll sit in front of vendors and interview them. It's called a challenge interview. That's what we've called it. And she'll look in the whites of the eyes of the CTO or the head of pre-sales or head of engineering, head of product, and ask them some really tough questions. Tell me about your product, but tell me when it failed and tell me how you got back up and helped address that challenge you created for your client. Mm-hmm. So the platform now provides it provides a 360 view on the vendor, not just the sales and marketing stuff. And it was a direction of travel which we kind of always had in mind, but I didn't know it was going to move this fast because a lot of our users came back to us and said, look, it's great marketing and sales, but we want to know a bit more. Can you find out more information? Yeah. So that's where we are today.
So when you started the business, Was your concern from the end user's perspective that either consultancies or resellers are going to be, well, they're not going to be vendor neutral, or they're not going to know enough about the market? All the different vendors are out there because, like you said, there are thousands. And is that you just got such an overwhelming amount of information now that the option available to all those end users is just insurmountable? No one else can offer that like you. Was that the biggest part of your thinking?
Yeah, it was a combination of things, actually. It was, how do we navigate through this landscape, which is crazy. So, all those salespeople who are knocking on your door, right? You don't have to speak to any of them. I mean, typically, how do you do it right now, right? Think about it. If you're a user right now, how do you go to Google? Good luck with that, because it's, you just have to put in AV and you'll see which company comes up. It's the same one, right? So unless if you've got deep pockets for SEO, that rules that out, right? Number two, if you've been funded, right? If you've been funded, again, you've got some massive marketing budgets there and you can go out and get it. But there's still a lot of the long tail of cybersecurity companies out there offer some very, very cool, innovative products. How are they supposed to find a voice out in the market, right? Very tough. And how are the users supposed to see those companies? Because they may be fitting, they may have that perfect offering for me, right? But I will never see them because there's too many of them. You can ask your buddies on your WhatsApp group. There's these large CISO WhatsApp groups. In fact, there's one in the US. It's got 1,200 CISOs on it. That's just wild, right? But the challenge we have with that is they've all got different budgets, right? I may be the CISO of a big bank. My budget's a lot. You may be the CISO of not a big bank, and your budget may be 10p, right? So, we'll have infrastructure changes. We'll be in different sectors, so we'll be different. So if you think about, if you add all of those things up, it's a very difficult and quite a scary place for a user to try and find that information in one place, as much information as possible, in a single pane of glass, quietly, without any advertising, without any noise, without any of that, right? And that's what we wanted to create with Jenny initially. It just so happens now we can provide a lot more information. In fact, one of the cool things that we're moving towards now, which is probably going to upset a few of the big research firms, is we're creating an analyst practice ourselves. So if, like a lot of these companies like G2, Crunchbase, they track the entire industry. They get it wrong all the time. And what we've realized is that Jenny sometimes picks up information we haven't captured all of that information. So we're building an analyst capability. If the information is not there, you can literally contact us and we want to provide you that. We'll go and get that information via an analyst, right? Because it enriches Jenny, but it also brings tremendous value to you, right? It's called research on demand. So it's to really help bring clarity on the market, help you speed up your decision-making processes, help you validate any questions you may have in procurement. There's so many use cases now. Working with a private equity firm, they're a $1 billion private equity firm in the UK, and they've asked us to find a bunch of cybersecurity companies in the UK with a certain criteria. They can go and do it on Google, but it'll take them forever.
Yeah.
We can do it very quickly. We've got the data now.
Makes complete sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the reason we started this podcast is we wanted people to get access to people and situations they wouldn't be able to get access to in kind of regular life or just being part of this industry. One aspect that I don't think people will know much about is the world of raising investment. Could you talk us through that experience for you, the kind of trials and tribulations of kind of that happening? There must be some really big highs and real lows in that experience. How have you found that over the last couple of years? So
let's start with this. I never used to have a white beard. It came after I started looking for money. Thank you to all the investors who potentially did invest in us. Right? It's really interesting because I've changed a lot as a human being. I've kind of, and my mindset on that is really, I used to hang off every word an investor said, right? And I used to give them all the time and energy and love they deserved, right? Until you get your, it's soul crushing, man. Any entrepreneur will tell you, you get half an hour to pitch your business to an investor, right? And it's not even the main partner. It never will be. It's going to be the analyst. And initially, these analysts come on, and you remember your call number 6 of the day, or call number 1 if you're lucky. So you're going to catch them at the best in the morning when they've had their coffee and they want to listen to you. But if you're call number 6 and they've had half an hour of these calls, they look shattered. They're tired. They're bored out of their head. They're probably thinking about going out that evening, and they've got to listen to you and your team with full of beans talking about how great your product is or service is to try and raise the money, right? And So that's number one. You've that changed my mindset on them, that okay, as much as I may have the energy and the beans to try and sell you the dream, sell you what Jenny is, the reality is I don't know how bad or your day's been. I don't know how good your day's been. I don't know how many of these calls you've had that day. I don't even if you understand my sector. I've had enough. Anyone looking out there to go and raise, I suggest before you even think about doing that, you get yourself on a lot of these free, just read on how to raise, and Seed Legals has some great documents. I'm not plugging them, by the way, but they just have some very simple white papers and nice blogs on how to raise and what type of raise you should be looking at. But equally, try and see if you've got people in your network. And if you're on LinkedIn, you will have somebody who's raised. Reach out to them and talk to them about how their experience was. For me, it was soul crushing. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done and continue to do, because what happens is you take your mind off the business and go out there to try and raise. And it's equally harder and compounded because you hear this other company on LinkedIn that's just raised £1 gazillion, but actually what they've done in the background is given away half of their company. So that's the other thing you got to bear in mind. I don't want to give away half of my company, actually. I want to hang on to it as much as I possibly can, right? So it's what your appetite is. It's how much energy you have in this. It's get as much experience as you can, talk to people who have raised, read as much as you possibly can around the subject. I am more than happy to talk to any of your audience, especially ones who are thinking about raising, and I can have a really nice conversation with them around the good, the bad, and the ugly around it, right? Because if we open it up now, it's a long one. I was fortunate, like I said, I've got this group of 5 cyber security entrepreneurs, and they've all raised, and I got some fabulous coaching off them. What to be careful of, what to be careful of, and also, is it too early? Do I need to be raising right now? Can I hold on a little bit longer? If you're running out of money, then you may have no choice, right? But if you can bootstrap, and I'd rather spend the money, I'd rather spend the time now with my team focused on generating the income, the revenue, and we sustain it a little bit longer, prove some of those revenue models, and then go out and raise. Then you're not on the back foot, right? If you go out there with just an idea on a piece of paper, it's hard, man. Do you know what I mean? Because you're number 45 of a billion people they're speaking to, and it doesn't make sense. There's only number 45. You're number billion of a billion people are talking to you. You can tell it's getting late here. It's nearly 9 o'clock. But you know what I mean. So maybe talk to me about this question when it's morning. Otherwise, I'll give the wrong advice.
Yeah.
But, arm yourself with information. Talk to as many people. And people do want to help.
Yeah.
I have a lot of people reach out to me on this subject, and I love giving them advice. Somebody's given me a really nice paper on how they raised, and I take away their name and details, but I share that, and it's a great 101 education paper on how to raise and what to raise and when to raise.
Yeah. Do you celebrate the wrong metrics in tech in many ways? Because you see businesses raising Series A, B, C, and it's like amazing. Like these guys have got this valuation. We don't really celebrate businesses that are maintaining themselves and profitable. That seems backwards in that sense to me. Why do you think that is? And is it the wrong way to be kind of measuring ourselves against? Or what's your thoughts on that?
I think look, I'm back out in the market in Q1 looking to raise quite a significant amount of cash, right? Only because I want to accelerate the platform, accelerate a bunch of stuff, and I want to go US. US is a big market for us, as well as out here in Asia Pac, right, and Oz. Look, it does send off the wrong message. If you're subscribed and following a bunch of VCs, all you're going to get is every time they've raised. But actually, you may not need to raise, and there's a lot of businesses out there who haven't raised in our industry. I know because I speak to these vendors. They've not raised a penny. They've just been around for a while, and actually they've grown organically, and they're a 20, 30, 40 million pound business.
Yeah.
I love talking to those guys. I really do, because they've done it ground up and they own the business, the lion's share of it, right? But the flip side to that is I also know companies who have raised, but they don't have an execution plan. So it's all great that you've raised £1 million. What are you going to do with it if you don't have an execution plan? You could do $1 million in revenue tomorrow, but if you don't have an execution plan, either or, it's never going to work for you, right? So you need to know what to do with that money, and then project it out against the business. What are you going to spend it on? And have a detailed plan. So before you go out raising, at least have the basics in place, right? Otherwise, but you're right. And it's one of my biggest bugbears. We never talk about the businesses. I'd love to be one of those in a few years time, say, look, I raised here. And there are some out there who raised initially, they never raised again, ever. they raised 100 grand in the first instance, and then they're like 30-40 million pound businesses now, and you just think that's where you want to be, really.
Yeah.
And you still hold on to the crown jewels, right?
Yeah, completely get it. That scalability, you probably need that investment to really drive it, wouldn't you, rather than doing it organically? That makes complete sense.
Yeah,
okay.
100%.
So, quick couple of fire questions. I know it's getting late in Australia, so we'll get from as quick as we can. We want to talk about the recovery. We'll say we're leaving the pandemic, might be going back into one, but we'll see how we're going to get on there. I'm talking around kind of recruitment, and one area that I find really interesting that you've kind of really invested in is looking to kind of students. Could you talk us through what that looks like? Are they placement years? Is it interim role within the organisation, or how have you kind of manufactured that?
Yeah, so I partnered with 3 or 4 different systems or providers rather, who arm us with or provide us with these young learners. We call them young learners, and one of my partnerships is with Brunel University, and we work with them. And every summer we take on some interns. They're only with me for 8 weeks, but they get a crash course in a bunch of stuff, not just about cyber. I myself. I'm kind of educated, but I'm not a smart guy, and I'm not an educated guy. And that I know my stuff, but I'm not a bright guy, in that respect. And I just see these young learners or these young people they kind of have these dreams and ambitions. And for me, with whether it's the Brunel University ones or there's another program available, but that program, so I'm kind of answering, I'm jumping about here, but so Brunel is one, sorry. The other one is again, it's a program that helps disadvantaged young learners. So they come from very, very poor backgrounds. They may have abusive parents, or their parents they may have died. It's quite sad stories. That program, we take those as well, and we'll run them through a sort of 6 to 7 week program with us. But we do it because I want them to not just learn about cyber, even though it's a cyber track. I want them to learn about entrepreneurialism. I want them to learn about what it's like to start a business. And the first thing we do with a lot of these guys and these providers, we say to them, yes, it's a cyber track, but actually, when I interview, say, Mark, you're one of these young learners. Are you interested in cyber? And they'll turn around and say, oh, do I have to answer that honestly? Yeah, don't say yes just because it's me and you think I want to hear that. What do you like to do in your life? What would you like to do? And some of these guys have some really lovely ambitions and dreams and goals, right? And I said, right, park cyber. We'll have to learn a little bit about cyber, right? But actually, let's talk about your dream and your ambition. Let's see how we can make that real. And that's what we do. And then I partner them with different parts of the business. So somebody in sales, somebody in development. If it's investor, they'll follow me for the day. They'll do some calls with me. But actually, by the time they leave, they've got the 2 things happen. Yes, I want to become a businessman or entrepreneur, or forget that. I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to study it. Do you know what I mean? So it's really interesting where they kind of fall in those 2 camps. They think they want to do this thing, but actually they go the opposite, and they think, actually, I don't want to do that ever again. How much hard work is that? The guy works from here to here, right? And that's what it's about. So it's a partnership of things. I can't go into all of those guys because we don't have time, but Brunel's my main one, and there's another company called Provista Park. They really look after these disadvantaged young learners. I've been with them for 5 years now, and I'm going to stay with them for a long time. I really like what they do, and it maps onto my values as well. I came from quite a poor background, so actually I want to help. I've got this thing I want to help as much as I can. And let's just get as many of these young learners into the industry as possible. But it doesn't have to be, some of them don't want to be.
Valuable experience, like coming in and seeing the exposure of what those businesses are doing and going, is this right for me or is it not? And I think it's credit to you giving up your time and making that happen. So kudos to you. 2 final questions for you.
Yes.
This one's going to be a real difficult one for I think you to answer, but cybersecurity has probably experienced a much tougher talent shortage than the rest of tech, and tech's really struggling in itself. I'm sure you've kind of seen that firsthand. What's the issue, and what kind of potential solution can you see? Is it more into young learners that we need to kind of invest our time into, or?
Yeah, I since I've started my program, I've had a lot of vendors knock on my door and say, "How do you do it?" And then I'll walk them through it, and they're like, "Oh wow, it's actually not that complex." I go, "It's not. It's just you have to want to do it," and that's the biggest difference. Whether they do this with me through any one of my providers, or if they want to have an ambition to do it themselves. So, is there a cyber skill shortage? Yes, but it's your appetite as an employer, whether you want to invest the time and the energy into the young learners and then get them trained, and or if you want that educated, there's 2 schools of thought here. do you go to uni and do a master's in cybersecurity or whatever, or do you take somebody and then a young analyst and build them ground up? And there's some amazing people in our industry now who are taking on these young learners and offering mentorship and time, and I applaud them. And at the same time, there's some great companies, which you know who they are, who are taking people who are doing other functional stuff, and then within a few weeks, by the sounds of it, you see them on LinkedIn and they're holding up a piece of paper. I'm a cybersecurity analyst, right?
Yeah.
And I love that. So I think as long as people are out there like ourselves and like these individuals and like these companies who are retraining and reskilling anybody for that matter who's got an interest in our industry or in cyber, we will catch up at some point. Right now, we probably won't. There's a lot of movement, but I just wish people would give, especially the larger employers, would give everybody a bit more of a chance than just looking for that CV piece, which is 10 years, 15 years in cyber. Well, good luck with that, man. Cyber was only around about 5-6 years. Do you know what I mean? So you guys see it, so you're the front end of it. So that's something we can't change, but I think it's being talked about a lot more, and I think the people who look for those, put those requirements out, I think even they're starting to realize now that there are options for us, which may work for us better than going out there and trying to hold out for that 20-year-old seasoned cyber expert, but actually they don't exist.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. It's tough to scale, because you say you want to make 5 or 6 hires this year, and if that person's not out there, you're not going to find them. But if you're building your own talent internally or leveraging perhaps people with other skills that can come across, I think that's personally the best way to go. So let's end on a nice, light-hearted way with regards to kind of recruitment and that side of things. Have you experienced any funny interview situations that you've kind of been in the last kind of 20 years of your industry?
Oh God, funny interviews. I don't know about funny interviews, but I've had I had a young learner rock up to a client call 10 minutes late, thinking it was an internal call, and start talking street. And
oh no!
I don't know if you've ever seen a brown man go red. I went red. So I wanted these young learners to come onto a client call. It was a half an hour call. The young learner rocked up late. I said explicitly, if you're going to be even 30 seconds late, don't bother rocking up. It's okay. But clearly, that's the challenges with some of the young learners. They kind of they're going to do what they're going to do. So we're in the middle of presenting this thing. I kind of said to my CISO, actually, look, there's all these people popping up on Zoom. Don't worry, they're all young learners. They just want to experience a call. We start getting to the nitty gritty of stuff, and your man comes in about 10 minutes, and then he just comes in, thinks it's an internal call, completely forgets it's a client call, and just starts talking about random stuff. I was, the way street people talk, man. It was just, I mean, it's funny because I try and mirror them, and I started mirroring him, forgetting that my CISO was on the call. The young learners started laughing. I went bright red, and literally the only person who didn't find it funny was the CISO. And in the end, he messaged me and he said, look, it's fine. It's cool. Yeah. Because you did go bright red, though. I all back there, man. And then, what could you do? I mean, we finished the call, and I spoke to the young learner, and I said, look, man, when you start working in real world, there's certain rules and certain etiquette, and know your audience, and check out the calendar invite. And if somebody said to you, don't attend the call if you're going to be late, and that's some of the risks you have. So it wasn't an interview per se. I've never really had a funny interview, but I've had incidents like that where, especially with the young learners, where they just, because I've never worked for anybody before, and you're the first segue into the industry or into world of work, and we're a software business, right? So we're pretty laid back, we're pretty chilled out, beanbag, that type of thing. So sometimes we don't draw the line correctly enough. They rock up as if it's just like, yeah, man, that type of thing, and you're like, oh, easy, yeah. No interviews, but definitely a few stories like that. Sure.
I like been flying them all that day. Sounds like an interesting video. Sure, recorded it for us, and we could have shared it with everyone.
Well, all you would have seen is this guy go red, man. Like I said, I've never felt so hot and flustered. But actually, it turned out to be. We joke about it now.
Yeah, it's good fun. Well, look, I really, really appreciate your time today. All the best with the latest version of Jenny. I'm sure you can absolutely smash it. And hopefully we'll do a catch-up story in a couple of years to find out where you are.
Oh, definitely. Listen, we will hopefully still be in Sydney.
Brilliant. Take care.